AI is creating billion-dollar companies overnight, but most people are only watching the sidelines. Because unless you own an expensive piece of hardware or run a massive tech company, you normally can't access the infrastructure side of the AI boom. Now that is what made Nodera interesting to me. Instead of buying GPUs, managing servers, or building the entire setup yourself, Nodera lets people rent shares in real AI compute clusters that are leased to AI companies, as well as machine learning teams and rendering studios. And honestly, it feels very different from the usual crypto narratives people are used to seeing. None of this is financial advice, always do your own research, but let's dive into this. So here we are on Nodera, and here's the basic idea. AI companies constantly need massive computing power, things like LLM training, AI inference, 3D rendering, data processing, and all of that requires enterprise-grade GPU infrastructure. Normally, access to that kind of hardware is limited to large companies with serious capital, but Nodera is opening that infrastructure layer to smaller private participants. Instead of purchasing hardware power yourself, you rent a share of managed compute clusters through the platform. Then those clusters are leased out to businesses that need computing power. And that's the core model. And importantly, it isn't positioned around mining or token hype. The entire system revolves around real compute demand. Now, why is this narrative growing fast? Well, AI infrastructure is becoming one of the fastest growing sectors in tech right now. Every major AI company needs compute. Every AI model increases infrastructure demand. And according to industry estimates, the AI infrastructure market is growing around 20 to 30% annually. That is a massive trend, and for most people, there basically is no realistic way to participate. Buying GPUs for yourself is expensive, managing servers is complicated, and scaling hardware requires technical knowledge most people simply don't have. And that is where Nodera becomes very interesting, because it removes that hardware layer completely. So how does the platform actually work? Well, you choose a tier, you rent a node share, and the platform handles the infrastructure management. There's no setup, no maintenance, and no configuring machines, as well as no cooling systems and no technical overhead. And that's what I really liked when I saw this. It actually shows the live utilization and performance metrics directly inside the dashboard. So you can see cluster activity in real time. Now for me, that transparency makes a huge difference. Now here we can see the slots I currently have, but if we go ahead and press Start New Slot, this is where we can choose our package. You can choose Start, Core, Turbo, Enterprise, or Enterprise Pro, and each will give you different returns per day and will last a certain amount of time. Now entry level starts at just $99. You can see you would get one GPU, the term would be 14 days, and you're expected to make 0.1 to 0.15% per day. You can also choose your payout mode, so you can claim, which basically means your daily income goes to your available balance, or you can compound your income, which basically will grow the slot balance and increase your earnings. Now, this is a great entry, and this is important because most AI infrastructure opportunities are completely inaccessible for smaller users. Now, the higher tiers scale into more powerful enterprise-grade setups with stronger hardware allocations and different yield ranges. According to the platform, estimated daily yields range from 0.1% all the way up to 2.2% daily, depending on the selected tier and infrastructure allocation. Again, this depends on usage, utilization, and workload demand. But the important part here is where the activity comes from. The workloads are tied to actual infrastructure usage and AI rendering and demand. Another thing worth mentioning is the geographic spread. The infrastructure is distributed across multiple regions, including the United States, Canada, Singapore, South Korea, and Japan, which matters because AI demand is global. Different regions have different compute requirements and enterprise demand cycles. Now, people are paying attention to this because AI is everywhere. The timing is perfect, but most people are only focused on AI apps and chatbots. Very few people are actually looking at the infrastructure layer underneath everything. And historically, in tech cycles, infrastructure is usually where some of the biggest long-term value gets created, because without compute, none of the AI products actually work. Now, it's important to differentiate this to mining and DeFi, because it's actually very different to traditional mining or DeFi models. Mining profitability has become harder over time. DeFi can actually be opaque and heavily dependent on token emissions, but Nodera's model revolves around compute demand itself, real workloads with real infrastructure usage and real B2B activity. Now, that doesn't completely eliminate risk, of course, but it does create a very different structure compared to the purely speculative systems of DeFi and other things. So overall, I think Nodera is tapping into a narrative that's only getting bigger, and that narrative is AI infrastructure. And instead of requiring people to buy expensive hardware themselves, they're making participation far more accessible, especially with an entry starting at just $99. The simplicity is probably the biggest selling point for me. You don't need technical knowledge, you don't need to manage servers, you don't need to understand GPU architecture. You simply just choose a tier, track it in the dashboard, and the infrastructure side is handled for you. Now, if you want to check out Nodera for yourself, I will leave a link below. And as always, do your own research, understand the model, and never invest blindly into anything online. If you enjoyed this breakdown, drop a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.